Welcome back to yet another episode of the Capes and Tights podcast right here on capesandtights.com. And I'm your annoying host, Justin Soderberg. We're welcoming another Justin to the podcast today. Justin Birch, comic book letterer for a wide variety of publishers. But here's a couple of titles that he has lettered in the past. Breath of Shadows, Sea of Sorrows, Road of Bones, Nightwalkers, Dead Mall, Tales from Nottingham, Over the Ropes, The Flash, Birds of Prey, Show's End, Seance Room, House of Slaughter, Something's Killing the Children, and so much more. Justin is a Ringo Award-nominated letterer who also works for the studio and World Design, same studio as our previous guest a couple of episodes ago, DC Hopkins, so they are friends and acquaintances as well. So check that episode out. But this episode features Justin Birch, comic book letterer extraordinaire. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, as well as capesandtights.com. Also, 5 stars, rate, review, subscribe, all those things on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. But until next time that you get to hear me do this whole intro speech again, this is Justin Birch, comic book letterer extraordinaire for Capes and Tights podcast. Enjoy, everybody. Welcome to the podcast, Justin. How are you?
I'm good. I'm excited to be here.
I think this might be the first time I've ever had a Justin on the podcast. I'm Justin, you're Justin. This is just Justin going on, which is funny because when I grew up, I honestly knew like 1 or 2 Justins, honestly. And so like in knowing people nowadays, the name Justin just makes me weird to me.
I'm going to guess that you were born in the early to mid 80s.
Mid 80s.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of Justins from around that time.
It is. And my middle name is Michael, so it's like that's another one of those names from the mid 80s where people were just like, well, we don't want to name our son Michael, but let's throw it in the middle name. That will work for you. Because I knew like tons of people growing up in my classes and stuff like that who had the middle name Michael. Very original parents of mine. And my mom's middle name is Michelle, so I think that's where it came from. But I was like, that's even more original, Mom. Just naming me the male version of Michelle. There we go. No,
it all makes sense now. It's all making sense. Yeah,
we figured the world out right here on this podcast, right? This episode. But welcome. I hope you're doing well. Hope your day is going well. Where are you located at? What state are you in?
So I'm in West Virginia.
Okay.
But the part of West Virginia that's really close to Pittsburgh. Like I'm only an hour outside of Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm. And that makes sense with your hat you have going on there, the little Penguins action.
Yes.
A hockey fan. Which is actually owned by our Red Sox team's owners, right? They're the same owners as the Penguins, which is funny because I realized that they only paid wasn't it like $900 million or something like that for the team when they bought the team, and they like this Red Sox are worth like $4 billion, and just to see the scale between hockey and baseball, money they spend on teams. But yeah, so the Penguins, little Sidney Crosby action over there. So you're basically you're West Virginia, but you're basically in Pittsburgh, so.
Yes. Yeah.
My brother lives in Virginia, so but on the other side. So yeah, but we're here to talk comic books. What's funny actually, before we get started, you knew who I recorded with earlier today?
Was it DC?
Nope, that was last week.
Oh, okay.
But Alex and Rich.
Oh. You know, when I was seeing the promos go up for like everybody that you had lined up, and I was looking at the list, I'm like, all right, yeah, I worked on that book with them, and I worked on that book with them, and I'm friends with him.
Well, I got Dead Mall right here. We had Adam and David on. I did a review, and I actually talked to Mark London from Mad Cave, so there's that. Then Sea of Sorrows is right here, which obviously you worked on. Cullen Bunn is actually coming up in April. So you got Nightwalkers there. So you just like all this connections here is great. And I guarantee you in these comic books behind me, there's a bunch more that have your name on it too. For sure. There's stacks of comic books on the floor here. But it was just kind of funny because I was talking to them and I was like, it's funny how I was recording with them this morning. And their episode comes out on Monday, the 27th. This episode comes out March 1st, which is the exact same week. And it's the day that issue 2 of Breath of Shadows comes out, and I was like, it's basically Breath of Shadows week right there. And then I thought to myself, why didn't I just tell Alex and Rich to come on this episode? We could have just done a huge Breath of Shadows episode, but let them have their episode. We'll take the lettering glory on this episode, and talk about that. But I just thought it was funny, and it ended up being that like it's not like we recorded 2 weeks ago with them, and then you're on. It's literally like the same day, a couple hours apart. But so let's start off. What's it like working with Alex and Rich? Like, how is it like working on? You worked on Sea of Sorrows, Road of Bones, and Breath of Shadows, right?
Yes, yeah, and that's and there's actually some other books and stories that I've worked on with Alex that Rich didn't write. So
okay.
I've worked with them a lot. There's actually a thing that I'm lettering for Rich right now that hasn't been announced, so I don't want to say it yet, but there's another project that we're working on together. What I will say is that the first story the three of us did together, Road of Bones, my mindset was just don't screw this up. It was a lot of imposter syndrome was going on right there during that series for me. And then we moved into Breath of Shadows, and I started to get a little comfortable. And I think Sea of Sorrows, and I started to get a little bit more comfortable. And I think this series, Breath of Shadows, is the first time that I've felt truly comfortable. Like I felt like I'm contributing and not worrying about taking something away.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
it must be.
If you were to if Rich and Alex were to hear me say that, they're definitely going to say that I'm crazy and that I didn't do anything like that. I'm you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. It's funny because it's one of those, you're not gonna, even if you did a horrible job, it's not like on the previous, when I talked to them on the last episode, they're gonna shit on you anyway. like it's like one of those things, like this is our book and we're trying to sell our book, so even if we never want to work with Justin again, we're not gonna say it was shitty because we want people to buy the book. But yeah, it's kind of funny how, and they had some nice things to say about you for sure in working on it. But it must be nice, I did talk to DC Hopkins too about lettering, so it's nice to have another perspective from another letterer. But it also must be nice that these three books, you like by the third book, you have an idea of how Rich writes and how Alex draws. And so like there's this like almost by the end, you just like, I know where the bubbles are going to go because kind of like where Alex is going to position people and so on and so forth. So it must, I don't say easy, but it must get easier on the third of a miniseries with the same people.
Yeah, absolutely. And the boring part that no one wants to talk about is that because I have that experience of working with them, I know how long it's going to take me to letter this like an issue. Like it's the perfect way to budget or sort of plan my day.
And that's actually leads into the next question. How does a typical day for you? And are you different than a lot of other letterers, or you think that letterers have the same specific way they do their projects and so on?
I like to think that a lot of us sort of have the same foundation or template as to how we approach every single day. I know in my case, I try to keep a very loose schedule because anything can happen at any given time, like a last minute deadline or a rush job or something like that. So I never really try to plan out my schedule like some artists do, like months in advance. Mine's really like sort of a week to week. And if you give me a deadline date, I'm going to work within that. But I also will work on whoever is yelling at me the loudest and whatever is on fire.
Mm-hmm. And so and then you obviously so how many books are you working on at one time, you think?
I have no idea. I don't know.
But it's not like one or two. It's a number of books at the same time. It's not just like you're doing one or two books at once.
Correct. Yeah, it's usually like one or two books a day. Like I'm not lettering 2 full books a day, but I might letter a book and then have to work on revisions for another 1 or 2 books.
Your story might be different than any other. Like, how do you become a letterer? How did you become a letterer?
So that's a great question. I had like a regular 9-to-5 office job that I just absolutely hated. And that's all it was. It was just a job. I never considered it a career. And so I think I just kept having bad days. And I would come home and I would just be like, I would come home and I would be happy, but then I would go to sleep and I'd wake up in the morning and be miserable because I knew I would have to go back to this job. So I sat down with my wife and we were trying to figure out like what I could do, what would make me happy. And she just asked, she's like, what makes you happy? And I said, comics make me happy. And I didn't want to open a comic shop because I didn't think that would make me happy at all. So I looked at the comic making process and broke down every single job. And when I got to lettering, that's the one that jumped out at me because my background, my degree is in graphic design. And I figured that's the job that I could do the best and I would actually enjoy doing. So from there, I took the comics experience lettering class, and I was like a 6 or 7 week class, sort of taught me the basics. And then as soon as that class was done, I traveled to every convention within like a 3, 4, 5 hour drive of where I live and just was showing off portfolio to everybody in Artist Alley. And I did that for like the first 3 years. Every weekend I was at a convention doing that.
That's insane. But that's also shows dedication to what you wanted to do. Like you actually put your mind to what you want. It's funny how you say portfolio. How did you find blank pages? How did you practice lettering though to show them what you were doing?
So in the class, they gave us like a 12-page story.
Okay.
So 12 pages are 12 pages of script. And they were just like, all right, letter it, and you can use this as a portfolio piece. Okay. And so I was just going around showing everybody those 12 pages at first.
That's perfect because I've always thought this, and I had this conversation with my wife, which obviously, but she's not into comic books like I am. She loves to read novels. She reads like 3 or 4 a week, honestly. And so explaining the different breakdown of the different roles that go into comic books, it's not as simple as just one person makes a comic book. There's like, some books could have 5, 6, 7 people working on it. Some people could have 2 or 3. And saying a lettering position, I don't know if a lot of people outside of the comic book industry knows a lot of what the letterer does and how it works. And I said to myself, it's like, if you want to become a writer, you write a story and you pitch it to someone. If you want to become an artist and you have that ability, you draw and you have a portfolio of that. It's like one of those things. It's like, how would I, as a person, I'm also a graphic designer, just all of a sudden I know I'd be like, well, I'm going to practice lettering because all the comic books I have here, minus Step by Bloody Step, have letters in them. And so like, I can't like go in and like, well, I guess I could download PDFs and remove and then I thought to myself, it's not as simple as just writing a story or as simple as drawing a picture. You have to have something to go off of unless you want to write a story, draw the pictures, and letter the book. So it's just kind of a funny thing. Like you can't just pick it up one day and be like, okay, I'm going to practice lettering today. You have to have something to go off of. And that's just an interesting aspect of being a letterer, I would think.
Yeah. And if one of the things I did too was I sort of searched around on the internet, and there were some forums that people would put up blank pages and script. So that was one way to do it. I've seen people take the preview pages that like Marvel will send out that doesn't have any dialogue and just write their own dialogue and do it that way as well.
Which is interesting because then you end up writing your own dialogue too. So you end up writing the story. In a sense, you're writing the story, but like it's a backwards way of writing the story versus seeing the picture, the illustration on that. Yeah, that's interesting. It's just one of those things I've always thought about. Like lettering is a different animal in that sense. It's the same thing I would think of if you're really good at inking. But maybe you don't have the ability to really, I mean, obviously I would think someone who can ink and draw, but if you have a really good job at inking, you have to get those pictures to ink over. So you have to like find those sketches of some sort to ink over and do the finalization on it. It's basically the last thing, right? I mean, I would think that lettering is the last thing in the production line before it goes to print and all that stuff.
I think lettering and colors are happening simultaneously. A lot of times it seems like I've lettered on inks while the colors are being completed.
Okay. So that makes sense too. Because I mean, yours is there can be because it's not obviously just the speech bubbles. There are other things that go into it as well. But sometimes you can letter a book around the colors. Sometimes your colors in the page don't really have much to do with what you're doing, correct?
Correct, yes.
But I mean, obviously sometimes it does, because if you write vroom on something, then you obviously need to know what colors to make that.
Yeah, that's why sometimes you see a lot of yellow sound effects, because yellow works best with all colors, a lot of colors. So you'll notice it's easier to tell what book a letterer only had the inks on when you see sound effects that are like in the entire book that are just yellow.
Okay. Excuse me. I personally have been drawn to. I'm a big Marvel fan. I've been a Marvel fan since I was younger, and I very rarely. I'm actually full on reading only my second graphic novel by DC. I actually don't read DC that much. I have to rely on other people's information to get the stuff from that. But I'm reading Son of Krypton right now for a book club I'm in. But I gravitate mostly now towards horror comic books,
Mhm.
and I see that your name is on quite a bit of them. Is that something you gravitate towards too as well, or is it just that I just noticed that because I see a lot of horror comic books?
It's funny that you ask. I've never really been a big horror fan. Uh, but for whatever reason, like it's almost like cast typing
Yeah.
or being typecast at this point. Um, yeah, I can't explain it. That's just how it ends up, I guess.
Well, and it's also like a lot of these horror comic book creators right now are just good creators, so it's good to get attached to these good comic books as well. Like obviously Cullen Bunn. First of all, Cullen Bunn, I don't know how he sleeps. I honestly don't understand that. He's always literally every day I get a new solicitation email saying he has a new book coming out, and I don't understand that. But yeah, it's just kind of funny how I noticed that on the different things. And your name is on a bunch of these too. But are you at a studio as well? Are you at Ann World?
Yes, yeah. I'm with
And
Amworld.
and so at Ann World, do are there books out there that you have actually lettered that say Ann World as a letterer as well?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. And how does that? I asked DC this question. Is this just if you've been if someone has asked you to do a book on your own, it's a Birch a book. If Ann World has gotten it for you, then it's an Ann World book. Is that how that works?
Yeah, so like think of it as how do I don't I would say half of my workload comes from Amworld. So it's just books that Darren Bennett, the head of Amworld, the owner of Amworld, has uh contracts in place with these publishers to work on certain books, and he'll pass them down to us. And then the other half is stuff that I've sort of gotten through those networking opportunities that I've done at conventions early on, or just talking to people. So a lot of my Anworld stuff that I've done, it is credited as Anworld design, and like a lot of my stuff at Mad Cave is done as myself.
Okay. And it's just an interesting thing. I've always said that it's like I'd almost like obviously getting more jobs. If you see the name on it and someone likes it, then they might call you. But also, it's just as easy to reach out to Ann World and be like, "Hey, we need someone to letter a book," and then they can help facilitate who gets the letter of that book and so on. And like DC mentioned on his episode was that a lot of times Ann World, what's his name? Who's the owner of Ann World again? I forgot. You just said it too,
Darren Bennett.
Darren, yeah, he sometimes does like issue one and
Yes.
then passes it off to someone else because that way they can have like style in place and all that stuff. That way they can facilitate the rest of the book, according to what Darren had said in the beginning, right? And that's how it works sometimes.
Yeah. So a perfect example of this is Darren started out on Something Is Killing the Children, and when House of Slaughter came out, I was lettering House of Slaughter from issue one.
Okay.
But the style is the same between the two books. So he developed the style in the main title, and then I used it in the spinoff House of Slaughter. And then starting with I don't even remember what issue. I'm just gonna say 29. I think it's 29. Starting with issue 29 of Something Is Killing the Children, I've taken over it, but it's because I know how to use the style that he set in place from way back when.
Which, I mean, obviously, it doesn't mean that you're just putting things in place. There's still obviously work that goes into it and some design aspect in your sense. But there is for those who don't know, who's going to listen to this podcast, there is like a teamwork thing between like James Tiny and the fourth, and then the team over there at Something's Killing the Children and the letterer that come together and make everything work. But then from issues 1 through forever, they need to make it so that each issue looks the same in the sense that you're not going to be thrown off by the lettering in the next issue. You're not going to be like, oh, that's a completely different thing. Sometimes how you feel before they started doing these whole number 1 resets, where you'd like buy issue 17 of something and then issue 18 of something would be a completely different artist. And you'd be like, what the hell just happened? We want to make sure that doesn't happen in the comic book industry. So they have this style. And I'm guessing it's some sort of template or so in the program where you can pull over balloons. Is that how that works?
It's we'll just call it a style guide.
Okay. That works.
So you can you also have access to those previous files, so you can go back and read and see what they've done and sort of study and pick up on it.
Do you find that as a designer, does that hinder your creativity in it at all, knowing that you didn't create it from the beginning, or is that just part of the job?
It is, man. So I'm honestly, I'm usually so busy trying to get in as much work as possible that I just don't even have time to think about it. I'm just like, all right, this is up, let's go, let's get it done, let's move on to the next thing.
Well, I understand that, and that's sometimes how I feel with, my day job is designing beer can labels for a brewery, and sometimes there is these ones that you're like, okay, you have a thing, get it done, get it printed because the beer is in the tank and we need to make it. And then there's other times where I have a lot more time where I'm like, no, I'm going to really work on it and make this one like one of my favorite ones to work on. And so it all depends on scheduling. I can understand that completely. When it comes down to the deadlines and getting paid and meeting deadlines is the big one for me, for everybody, for all of us designers out there. Deadlines is a huge thing. Anybody in the industry of creating something like from scratch. Is there a book so far? I mean, that you've really been happy to work on, or one of the most proud books you've worked on? I know you worked on a ton, so it's kind of hard to pick out it's like picking your favorite child. But is there something that, like, when you tell someone this is the book I work on, you're really happy about that?
So one of the books that I worked on, besides I could sit here and I could name all of the big stuff that I've worked on, but the one that I'm really super proud of is Pantomime from Mad Cave. Because the whole story is about a bunch of hearing impaired kids, and it's a comic book, so they have to, how are they communicating to each other? How do I convey that? Like, I can't just do a normal like tail to their mouth because they're not speaking. So coming up with that style was it was really it was fun. I sort of pinned myself into a box once I came up with it, because I had to like fit things in and shape things and make them work. But that was future Justin's problem to deal with, not current Justin's problem.
Oh my God, how many times did that happen though? Like, and you create something like when I've learned over the years, we just announced at our brewery that we're creating a what's called a hop water. So basically, it's just seltzer with hops, and so it's a non-alcoholic beverage and so on. And when we were creating it, one of the owners of the business said, can we make the lettering at the bottom of the can bigger? And I said, well, no, because there's another style of this coming out that's a longer word. And I'm really anal about the fact that I need it to all look uniform and the same size text and all this other stuff. And he's like, oh, I understand. So I showed him the other one. I'm like, see how it maxes out the space we have? Oh, okay. So the smaller one. And I said, that's just because I don't want to put myself into a position where I later on have to change something that I initially had put into the thing. So thinking ahead, sometimes you have to, but you're right. Sometimes it's just like, oh, that's the future Justin's problem, not current. I'll figure that out later. Or like, you try to design things, and you're, as a designer, as big as possible, because you don't know how big someone's going to want it, or in some sort of vector format, so that people aren't going to, like, if they want it on the side of a building, you're not like, oh shit, I made this the size of a 11 by 17 poster. They can't go any bigger than this. And so that's been happened in the past when I first started working, and they'd be like, oh, design this small little postcard. And then 3 weeks later, like, oh, can you make that the size of a banner? It's like, now I have to redo the whole thing. So I've learned to make things so that you can future Justin makes it a little bit easier on them. But that is an interesting thing to see, is to put yourself in a position for issue 1, not realizing that in issue 10 or 5, you might be in a box and hard to figure out what you're gonna do. Especially with the people who, that's interesting. No tails. Yeah, I have to read that. I haven't read that one yet. I have to get that one. I'll have to figure that out. Where is that?
It was good. It was a good 6-issue series.
Okay, see, 5, 6 issues. That's where I'm at right now. It's all I want. 5 or 6 issues. I mean, is that good for someone who's a letterer to have that like an end point on something, or would you rather have a book you can work 30 issues on?
So, from a money and security standpoint, like, you definitely want those 30, 40, 50 issue runs. I think the most I've ever done is 24. But it's nice to sort of reset, after 5 or 6 issues. You can just kind of put this one to bed, and you're like, all right, if there's a volume 2, then that's fine. I know what I'm going to do. But it is nice to have that starting and end point.
I can see that too. And it's funny how much, and I hate to say this, but it's funny how much finances or your well-being has something to do with it. It sounds so, crash crass, can't say the word crass, to think that money has everything to do with it, but we all have to make a living. And so like there is a future when you're an independent worker like yourself, where you rely on the next, it's not just, you don't just get a salary. It's not like all of a sudden, no, you're just like, whatever, I'll work, whatever I work. There is this, I have to wait for the next job. So with a bunch of miniseries, you have to line up those miniseries, which scheduling takes takes an amount of time. That's a big thing. And so, which you're not getting paid for scheduling things. And so I can see that 30 issue thing being more of something you'd rather do than a mini series, but not saying you don't like to do mini series, right? I mean, obviously you'll do any mini series. Someone will pay you to letter a book, you'll do it.
Yes, exactly. Like I've said it from day one. I've said that I'm a sellout. I will work, for whoever pays me.
But like, so we've had, I mentioned at the beginning, we had Adam Caesar and David Stoll on and things like that. I gave you credit on that episode too, because Dead Mall to me, David, his artwork on that book to me is weird how I haven't seen much of what he's done with when you take a footstep and it has that ripple effect of sound on it. And I said that with Adam's writing and then your lettering on a book like that, it's a one whole project that just makes me really happy about Dead Mall. How was the experience in working on Dead Mall with those guys?
So real quick, I should add this. David is actually the artist on Pantomime.
Okay, look at that.
So there's the connection again. He's actually the one who got me the job at Dark Horse. This Dead Mall was my first Dark Horse credit. And so I guess when he was drawing it or penciling it, I guess they asked him if he knew anyone, and he's like, yeah, I know a guy. You should talk to him about lettering it. So I'm always going to be grateful for that.
But it's a unique book in a sense that like it has, I don't know, we talked about at nauseum almost on the episode about dead malls and malls being extinct. I live in Bangor, Maine, in a space where our mall has like a church in it and like 2 theater companies. So like not like walk by things. They're just like, there's an empty space that you can rent for pretty cheap. So I'm going to rent it. Our local Comic-Con for 3 years did the comic convention at the mall. Each room, like each abandoned store basically at the mall front was like the celebrities were in one, the artists were in another. And then they had like vendors in the middle. Because it was cheap. They were able to get the whole thing for like a third of the cost of the local arena. And so like they did it at a mall. And I said, why didn't you guys create Dead Mall like 2 years ago? Because then you guys could have actually, like all of you guys could have come up to Bangor, Maine and did a convention in a mall, which would have been like so meta that it would have been perfect for you guys. But no, but yeah, it's a great book. And I think people should definitely pick it up. And again, like I said, some of the books that I realized over the years that are my favorite are the ones that everything in the book works together. Mm-hmm. And that's including from the writing to the artwork to the colors to the lettering. And I mentioned to Alex and Rich too, it's like sometimes people forget about the letterers in a sense, not forget about it, but it's not the forefront.
Right.
And I think a bad lettering job can take away, and that doesn't include just bad lettering, but almost too much of your own stamp on it. So it pulls away from the actual book. What's it like to have to try to meet that, like without trying to like take away from the book, but adding to it?
Man, I'm terrible at this because for the longest time, my sort of thought process was, like I would always compare myself to in football, like an offensive lineman, whereas you only notice offensive linemen when something has gone horribly wrong. And so over the years, I've had to sort of go from a don't be noticed for the wrong reasons to it's okay to add stuff. Mm-hmm. to maybe, if you think something, I've been doing it long enough where I feel like the people I work with trust my opinion and trust my my judgment if I add something they think that might enhance the story.
Okay.
So it over the years, I've gone from the don't be noticed to sort of maybe it's okay to break out just a little bit.
It's fine because I think it's one of those things that sometimes those on the outside who don't know, like I said, it was either, I forget who it was. was either Adita or Hassan on a podcast I was listening to that had mentioned that's where I really first like started like really paying attention to lettering in a book and them explaining the different situations and different things that I didn't realize, I think, as a young comic book reader, that like if the word is like, I'm trying to think of like a big one just because I had the podcast with DC is on his Noctera run where he did vroom on the side of a truck. Like that's not the artist doing that's you, or not you, but like DC on that book. That like some of those like any basic big words like that a lot of times is a letterer, and it can be a combination of the two. Sometimes artists will do that or ask to be done, but like to me, I think I just assumed that the big lettering that's outside the bubbles were actually done not by the letterer but by the artist, and that's a good thing in a sense that you're making me notice something, but not taking away from something in the same sense. Like that room on DC's book makes me go, oh, that's beautiful and it's gorgeous in the way it looks, but it's not taking away from the fact that there's a truck behind it that was drawn by someone else.
Yeah, it's I think I hope this doesn't happen. I hope that broom is not DC's legacy, like when it's all said and done, right? But I know that guy has gotten so much work because of that single sound effect.
It's true. I mean, if you go to his website though, let's be honest, it's the first thing on his portfolio. So like it has to be. I mean, it's not even like it was in a nothing book either. I mean, yeah, Noctera was an excellent book too. So like, there's that too. But like, yeah, you're right though. He's gonna have to get like tattooed on him the word "vroom" written across something with a tractor trailer truck just because of that one page. It's funny how you mentioned that because I'm guarantee you that you're right. I'm not the only one that's pointed.
And you know, honestly, like if I wasn't friends with him, I would never say something like that. But I know that like he's gonna hear that, and like the next time I see him, he's gonna be like, you know, way to go, a-hole. Like that was great.
Yeah, it's the only good thing he's ever done too, right? I mean, that one sound effect is the only thing, you know. But yeah, so it's kind of funny, and I love. Are you friends with a bunch of other letterers? Is that how that was? Is there like a group, a community of you letterers that like are friends, or are you just acquaintances with people in the comic book industry? Some of them just happen to be letterers.
Okay, so if I had to really sit down and think about this, if I'm friends with obviously everybody in AnWorld.
Yes.
I would say outside of AnWorld, there might only be. I'll say outside of AnWorld, there's probably only really one other letterer that I you know, actively talk to, you know, hang out on Zoom calls with, meet up every Thursday night. There's sort of like a indie comics Zoom hangout, and we usually just sort of go in and just, I don't know what everybody else does. I just work. I'm just sitting there working the whole time, like,
and it's just in the background.
yeah.
They're like, so, they're like, Justin, we've been talking to you for 20 minutes now. Where are you listening?
It's so much. It's even worse when like it's NHL playoff time, because then like, you know, I'll be working straight ahead. The Zoom will be here, and then like the hockey game's playing on the iPad right here. So I'm either like looking straight ahead or watching the game on my iPad and not paying attention to anything else that's going on. And then factor in that I've got, you know, 2 kids under 4 running around upstairs, and it's amazing. It's amazing that I can actually get any work done at all.
Well, I think it's the you know, not generational thing. I think it's somewhat generational thing. And I hate this is my 9 to 5 job is like I said, as a creative director for a brewery, and I work in an office that this other person in the office manages all the employees in our restaurant. And it's a generational thing about these people who can't focus on one thing, or like they let their job suffer because of other personal things and things like that. And I just felt like ever since I first got a job, it was like the job was number one. And even my family sometimes took a second fiddle on that. I mean, obviously nowadays with a wife and a 2-year-old, and it's not like they take second fiddle, but like the idea that I think generationally, a lot of the people who are over the age of maybe 35 can multitask and actually get things done. Like I can easily watch a movie at the same time that I'm writing something or designing something and still get. I don't think I could watch a movie that I really needed to pay attention to, but like
right.
You could, like I said, you just mentioned the hockey playoffs. Like you can watch them. You don't need to watch every single pass of a hockey game, but like you can get an idea. If you hear a breakaway, then you can stop what you're doing watch the game really quickly if they're talking to you on the Zoom and still get work done.
Yeah.
I don't know. It must be a generational thing. It must be, because I don't think younger kids can do it.
Yeah. Oh man. So this is gonna sound really weird, but I'm gonna tell the story anyway. So I like having the background noise, because sitting down here by myself in silence would just be awful.
Yes.
What I've really started to like having on as background noise lately is YouTube videos of people who are doing like garage sales or yard sales or flea markets or stuff, because like there's some like serious like ASMR sounds going on as they're digging through bins of toys, or like flipping through a long box of comics. I'm like, yeah, I can just sit here and work to that. That's fine. Yeah.
There's sounds like that like I've always said that like the clink of a puck off of a goalie net is one of those weird things that's actually, if you're the offensive team, that's not a good sound to hear most of the time, because it usually comes right back out at you. And the other one, growing up as someone who really enjoyed skateboarding, was the click of a skateboard doing an ollie. And the having those stuff in the background, I could definitely see a hockey game being good. I can understand them rummaging through things. I could see that being a nice little thing to have in the background. But I've seemed to watch a ton of movies over the past 2 years, just again because I have it on in the background. I just have it on and I pay attention. I get what's going on, but I save the ones for my wife and I to watch if I'm like, okay, I really need to pay attention to that, because I'm not going to know what the hell's going on if I don't pay attention to it. But well, I watched Daytona 500 yesterday, and I'm not a huge racing fan, but I was like, oh, I guess it's the 500. I'll watch it. And Travis Pastrana, I'm an action sports fan since a young kid. He was racing in it, and I was working while it was on in the background, not realize it was going to take like 4 hours to watch the entire thing. And it went into like quote unquote overtime. I guess I didn't know there was an overtime in racing, but I was like,
I'm still wanting someone to explain NASCAR overtime to me, because I just don't get it.
Well, it was fun. When they were explaining it on TV, I was like, okay, I understand that they don't want the race to end in a caution, because that's kind of boring. Like, it's they're just riding around in a circle and finally someone wins. So they're like 2 extra laps, but if they are in first place still when they go through the first lap, they automatically win. They press a button. If there's it got very confusing at the end, and the race ended up being won by a guy in an office somewhere, in a booth somewhere, pressing a button. Whenever he pressed that button is when the race ended. So it was whenever he decided that the crash was happening is when the crash happened. And then like 30 seconds later, he hit the button, and in that time, the first place and second place person had switched places, and that person ended up winning. But if you had pushed it 5 seconds earlier, the other person would have won. So that was kind of pissed me off after 4 hours of watching.
Yeah, there are certain things, like I'm a huge sports fan. I don't just like hockey. I like everything. Yeah. But there are certain things that I do not understand in certain sports. I do not understand NBA salary cap or the way buying out contracts and then someone signs with someone else. I don't understand that. I don't understand the luxury tax in baseball. And now I don't understand overtime in NASCAR.
Yes, there you go. See, we don't need to know everything though, right? As long as you can understand lettering, that's all you need. No, and you don't even know everything in lettering probably. So you're still learning every day, probably.
Exactly.
No. Yeah. No, there's definitely things, and I'm a huge NBA fan, and that's one thing is the salary cap in the NBA. It's the same thing in the football though. Like, nothing makes sense in football for salary cap either, because there is one, but yet they can finagle something and do something so that it doesn't meet. There's like, okay, so all of us have to do is a couple more pieces of paper. You don't hit salary cap. It's weird, but yeah. Overtime and NASCAR, I found out about watching the event, and my wife's like, we're not watching this every weekend. I'm like, hell no, I can't watch this every weekend. Are you kidding me? I said, big ones. I looked at the calendar and I was like, oh, I could watch the Bristol. They race on dirt. I was like, I can watch that one. That one looks like fun. My son's a huge Cars fan. Like, he's 2 years old, and everything in the world has to do with cars. And so I thought he'd want to watch it. He watched it for like 10 seconds, then went and, I don't know, did something out in the corner. So
my dad really loved NASCAR. So like every Sunday growing up in the 90s, it would be on.
Okay.
But he had a rule that was you only needed to watch the first 5 minutes and the last 5 minutes, and he would be asleep for the rest of the time in between.
Well, maybe the sound, like you mentioned, background sounds, and maybe the sounds of a race car driving is just a nice hum for you to like fall asleep to.
Maybe.
But when I was in Massachusetts in 2006, 2007, I dated a girl whose friend's dad, we'd go over there on Sundays and they'd watch the race. And he had this room that he'd turn, like when they started the engines, the volume was so like loud that the whole place would vibrate and stuff like that. So now I always feel like I have to do that. If we watch a race, I have to be like, my wife's like, turn the volume down. I'm like, sorry. But yeah, it's the same thing. I could say that about basketball too, though. I'm a huge basketball fan, and let's be honest, the last 20 minutes of basketball game is all you really need to watch. I'll say that. Even as a big fan, it's really the most important part of the game, the last 20 minutes of basketball game, because it really is the last minute of a basketball game, but right. 20 minutes in time. But yeah. So back to comic books really quickly before we wrap this thing up. I was thinking to myself the other day, if I were to work in a comic book industry, like in the actual like drawing or creating comic books, which comic book I would like to work. Is there a comic book that you haven't worked on yet that it would be a dream to work on in the future? Not, saying you're pitching for a job right now, but like, is there a creator or a comic book series, even if it's not around anymore, maybe say they came back with it, that you would love to letter in the future?
Yeah, this is actually a really easy question for me. I would love to work on an X-Men title, just because I was born in 1983, so I really started remembering stuff around 1992 when the animated series came out. I love the X-Men. I've actually put together a full Uncanny X-Men run from 1 to 544. So for me, I would love to work on an X title.
Which is hard because that's not a very easy thing to do. And I don't know if anybody knows that, but they basically have in-house lettering with VC. Yes. But like, maybe one of these days that thing will change. You don't know. The market, the way that the comic book industry looks right now could be completely different in 5 or 10 years. So you never know. Maybe that'll be happening, because that's one thing. I think was it DC who was saying that like it's the one of the one publishers that he hasn't worked on yet.
Yeah. They have their own in-house studio.
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying give me regular work on an X-Men title. I'm just saying like a 10-page story in an annual. That's
Okay, then you could just say
that off the bucket list.
You could see it like my brother when he played a concert with a band. He's like, the band's playing on 3 stages that way, and says that he played with that band. At that point, you could just say, at least I was able to, letter a Wolverine story or some sort of X-Men story. I can understand that. I'm guessing there are some projects that, like you just mentioned, you with Alex, that are working on that you can't announce. And I mentioned that to the two guys this morning, which was, if you don't have a project that you can't talk about, that means that that's not a good thing, because that means that you're not working. So I'm glad you have something you can't talk about, because that means you're getting paid at some point. So that's a good thing for you. The one thing I asked DC, which I'd love to get your opinion on too, is that if you could go back in time and take over for someone, the X-Men can't be the answer. He had mentioned, is it nothing wrong with the way that someone else letters a book, but he had mentioned he'd love to go back and do like early Spawn. And do that, just because of he's a big Spawn fan or whatever. He's now doing stuff for Spawn as well. But like, is there a title that you could go back? You can mention X-Men, but is there an X-Men series like 1 through 554? Would you like to go back and letter that, or is there something else that you would love to be able to go back in time and letter that book? And again, this is saying, I want to preface that again, this is nothing against the way someone else letters a book. This is the opportunity that if you got a chance, any artist out there or creator of some sort had the ability to go write for a story that is no longer being done anymore. This is a hypothetical thing. This is not a real thing, obviously, people. I wanted to preface that.
Obviously, I can't pick the easy thing and say, oh yeah, all the stuff that I did when I first started, because it's absolute trash, right? I'm not allowed to pick that, right?
No.
Okay. So
that's how you learn.
I've got to actually think and pick something. What would if I could go back in history and letter anything that's been done?
I mean, it can go back. I guess you can go back 3 years. You can go back 15 years. You can go back and letter Action Comics #1. Like, there's just something that, and again, this is nothing like I wanted to say to someone, like, this is not because it's done bad and you want to do a better job at it. It's just having the ability and the chance and the opportunity to letter something that's either historical or means something to you would be kind of cool.
Okay, so I've got two answers for this. The first one, this is a joke answer, but I'm going to say it anyway. I would love to have gone back in time to letter the GI Joe silent issue,
so that you can actually.
Yeah. Okay. Uh, the the real answer, I think I would have loved to have lettered the first comic that I ever remember buying. I think that would be cool to do. The first comic I ever bought was X-Men Adventures #1, which was just the comic adaptation of the episode. So yeah,
which is excellent. And that comic book actually, I think it started to go up in value a little bit too when they announced the X-Men 97 reboot, but the animated series coming back. I think that was the one that ended up going up in value a little bit because of that. If I'm not mistaken. But I can see that. That's cool.
That they announced it, and then like 30 minutes later, I was on eBay looking for a 9/8 copy.
But it's funny how you say that too, because this would be a really bad movie for someone to create and watch. But like, so you're gonna go back in time. The only thing you can do is erase the letters from a book, and you have to re-letter it. There'd be like 3 people in the world that'd be like, hell yeah, I gotta watch this movie. And that's just funny, like time travel movie I'm gonna start making, or TV show I'm gonna start making, where people have to go back in time and letter a book that was not them lettering in the first place. No. So that's awesome. I don't have anything else to talk about. Just letterers fascinate me, and that's part of my thing. And I think it's forever. It's always going to be that way. It's like a job that I didn't know existed until about 5 or 6 years ago, and which is awesome. And I'm glad that there are people like yourself doing it and doing it talentedly. Did the design team at Dark Horse come up with this logo, or is that something you worked on too?
That was not me. That was all production at Dark Horse.
Okay.
I'm assuming it was them and not David himself or
now.
something.
But do you work on, actually that's a good question. Do you work on like logos and things like that and trade dress as well, or just lettering?
Just lettering. Anytime I get an email with someone wanting to know if I can do a logo, I always politely decline.
It looks like it says always. Designer is Christopher McCrae, just so we can clear that up. Digital art technician. Wow, there's a lot of people listed in this book. But yeah, so that I just have a thing as a designer as well. I like to call out when I like a nice logo on something. But yeah, there's a lot of people who reach out to me too and say, can you do it? And I've said yes too many times and failed to meet deadlines because of all the other shit that I've got going on and things that I've been like, all set, thank you. But this person might be able to help you. Go see them. They have more time on the hands or more ambition to get this thing done for you. So I'd rather just do what I'm doing now with my plates already spinning all over the place. So, but yeah, anything else you'd like to chat about before we say goodbye here? No.
Can I just plug some stuff?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So, real quick, the letter, I would feel bad if I didn't mention the letterer friend that I said that I talk to at least once a week.
Okay.
Is my mic not good?
You're good?
Okay. So a shout out to Micah Myers, who is another fantastic indie letterer. The stuff that I want to plug is feel free to give me a follow on Twitter at Justin Birch. On Instagram, I'm Justin _ Birch _ letters. And I just recently started a YouTube channel where I hope to do live lettering sessions. There's one up there now, so you can see me lettering on a page or two there. And it's also where I plan on showing off comics that I get in the mail, because I buy and collect a lot of comics.
I've noticed that on your Instagram there's a couple of them there that I'm like, oh, nice little grab there. I was waiting for a FedEx delivery. I got some CBCS verified signatures from them. Like I had a George Perez where I was like, oh, I really got to do this verify. And then I had a Todd McFarlane. So I'm a big Todd McFarlane art fan. So I'll leave it. And I had I'm a big Walking Dead fan, and he did a variant for Walking Dead 100. And then I had him sign, and then I was like, oh crap, now he's just sitting there. So I got, those are supposed to come back today, and I got another package from FedEx, but not that package. So I'm really kind of stressing out about where the heck that is, because that George Perez one is not replaceable in a sense. I had him, it's hard to see, I don't know if you can see back here in the background, that's him drawing a picture for me at a festival, a Comic-Con in Massachusetts, where he signed this book. And it's like, yes, could I go online and buy a George Perez book on eBay signed, CGC signed? Yes, I probably could do that. But he signed it for me in person, and that's irreplaceable in my opinion. Right. It's an experience that I can't get back. Micah Myers is on my next wish list, so we'll have to be in touch to see if we can put us in contact, because I love a lot of the stuff that's been put out by that person for sure. So I would love to chat at some point. I think 3 letterers within the span of like 6 episodes is probably not the best thing, because people are going to be like, okay, enough of the lettering. But sometime in the future, Micah would be an amazing guest on the podcast for sure. But yes, give you a follow. I'll give you a shout out on our page when we post this, all your links. I'll link the YouTube channel on there as well. Excited to see some of those live lettering things, because I'm a big fan and looking forward to that. I will list at the very beginning of this episode all the different titles that I can get out of my mouth that you've been working on, and give you a shout out to that. But specifically, this episode drops on the day that issue 2 of Breath of Shadow comes out. And so grab issue 1 and 2 of Breath of Shadows too, because it's a great story from you and Rich and Alex and the people at IDW. IDW has been putting out some great IDW originals, and this is just part of that thing. But also pick up Dead Mall and Tales from Nottingham, and so many more out there as well. So I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to come on. I will say that the Bruins are better than the Pittsburgh Penguins. I just want to say that now at the end of this episode.
Statistically, according to the records and the standings right now, that is factually true.
I literally look at the standings sometimes and I'm just like pinching myself. I'm like, I love being a Bruins fan, but this is, for so much of the season, it was just like, oh my God, I can't believe how good they are on paper. And Jeremy Swayman is from a product of UMaine, which is literally in the same town my brewery is in. And so I always have to be a fan of a player going from UMaine to the Bruins. Right. But I'm not a UMaine hockey fan. I'm actually a UMass Lowell hockey fan. But that's a longer story for another day. Maybe there'll be a hockey episode.
We totally could do a hockey episode, just because I don't know if you knew this, but where I live, there's a minor league hockey team here. So I get a lot of those college players.
Yes. And so we talked about, I had Trace Dean on, who wrote We Ride Titans. Mm-hmm. And I had obviously David Harper, who runs Off Panel, but also sketch.com. And episode 100 is with Kyle Starks is going to be on, and those people are huge basketball fans. So I thought, let's just piss off all of our followers that are comic book fans that hate sports, and just do an entire episode about basketball. And so I think we're going to try to do that sometimes towards the NBA finals, to do that, because I'm just like, because David gets shit on all the time whenever he has someone on and they talk about basketball. People like message him like, I thought this was a comic book podcast. And then I'm like, okay, people, you can turn off the end of one episode. Like, it's okay. We have other passions other than just comic books, people. It's a bigger, wide world out there. But I'm glad to meet another sports fan who's also a comic book fan who works in the comic book industry. And I really appreciate, with the name Justin. Like, that's just like, so I really appreciate you coming on and chatting with us. Be sure to everybody to follow them. Follow Justin on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter, all those things, and YouTube channel nowadays. And again, the links will be on our website, capesandtights.com. But until next time, I really appreciate it. You're missing some space there. You need to add some more stuff into the behind you.
Oh, I'm actually trying to sell everything so I can buy an Amazing Spider-Man #1.
Oh, okay. So that makes sense then. So you sold some things, and that's why there's missing spaces.
Yes.
Oh, you're in the right direction there.
Yes, I'm going the right way.
Yes, you are. I really appreciate it, Justin. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.